Also acknowledge all the members of the gallery and everybody who's back for the start of the year, and of course the Secretary of my own department, Natalie James, and the members of the department who are here. I want to start by giving you a statistic that you haven't heard before. 61 hours. And I give you that statistic as an example of the way governing and the use of the parliament has changed with the change of government. 61 hours. In any ordinary parliamentary week, there's 23 hours of government time. During the life of the previous government, that parliament spent 61 hours voting that people be not allowed to speak. 61 hours of people being flown around the country, clerks of the parliament, all the resources that goes into here. We had figures that I'm reluctant to rely on from Paul Fletcher, given the way the Leppington Triangle figures turned out. But the figures from Paul Fletcher, where he says $1 million a day for the parliament to sit. 61 hours dedicated to making sure no opposing voices were heard. Now, you will have people say what it was like to work with the previous government when consultation is talked about now. Back then, what the previous mob were requesting was confirmation, and if you didn't deliver confirmation, you were given confrontation. The consultative approach that we have applied to the parliament itself and to the way we have governed is of itself not just a difference in the way government functions, it delivers a difference in the quality of the outcomes. And I want to be able to refer to quite a bit of that. In terms of legislation, for the same number of sitting days as we had last year, we had 25 extra hours of debate. The legislative achievements during that time for last year ensured we enshrined the climate change targets in law. We implemented the recommendations of the Respect at Work report. We delivered on our commitment to the early childhood education sector for cheaper childcare. We established the National Anti-Corruption Commission. We established world-leading paid family and domestic violence leave. We restored dignity in aged care. We've made medicines cheaper with the first decrease in the pharmaceutical benefits scheme in its 75-year history. We had the Secure Jobs Better Pay Bill. We've provided energy price relief for families and businesses, established Jobs and Skills Australia, and expanded the Commonwealth Seniors Card. In all of that, there was a consistent guarantee that different opposing views were part of the debate. I'll get a bit later as to what that meant in terms of changed outcomes. For the year ahead, though, it's not like with all of that agenda, our job is done. Some people, after the talk of so-called small target during the campaign, then quickly said this agenda is big, and now have said, oh, did you get it all done in the first 6 months? No. The year ahead, in the autumn session alone, we'll be progressing the establishment of the Housing Australia Future Fund. The legislation required to hold a referendum in the second half of this year to enshrine an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament in our Constitution. To guarantee superannuation as a right under the National Employment Standards, and to affirm beyond any doubt that temporary migrant workers are entitled at all times to workplace protections. Establishing the National Reconstruction Fund, delivering, and this will be one for next week, delivering on our commitments to extend paid parental leave, reform of the safeguard mechanism to enable Australia to meet our new emissions reduction targets of 43% by 2030 and net zero by 2050. And of course, the changes to cultural policy that the Prime Minister and I announced only on Monday, establishing Creative Australia, and I acknowledge the presence of Adrian Collette here, the CEO of the Australia Council, establishing Creative Australia, including within it Music Australia and a Centre for Arts and Entertainment Workplaces in legislation in the coming months. We will also, and we will be dealing next week, with the legislation to protect what was thought to be presumed, and that is the recommendations of the Bell inquiry into Scott Morrison's secret ministries to make sure that it never happens again. Later this year, there will be further legislation to abolish the Administrative Appeals Tribunal and replace it with an administrative review body that actually serves the interests of the Australian community, to implement a new package of national environmental legislation as outlined in the government's Nature Positive Plan, to deliver on the remainder of our election commitments in my own workplace relations portfolio, and I'll say more about that a little bit later, and to set obligations for streaming services to make sure that there are Australian content obligations, whether you are watching your television through free-to-air on the public broadcaster, whether you're watching through cable television or whether you're watching through a streaming service.